Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank and Chase Commercial Term Lending, the Witkoff Group, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey-Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantil Commercebank N.A., Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Newbanks, MHP Real Estate Services, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Continuum Company, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Do you know what the chicest place in New York City today? Everybody wants to be in Brooklyn. They want to live. They want to shop. They want to drink wine. They want to entertain. Lenders want to give money. Everybody wants to be in Brooklyn. So today I've assembled this group of Brooklyn boys, they don't all live there, who will provide their insight on what's happening in the borough of Brooklyn. My guests today include Paulo Garcia, who's the Senior Vice President, Branch Manager for Commercial Real Estate at Mercantil Commercebank, New York Branch. Brian Leventhal, who is the co-founder and CEO of Brooklyn Winery. Alex Barrett, who is the owner, principal of Barrett Design. And last but not least, a person who I consider like the king of Brooklyn, my buddy Tim King, who is the managing partner of CPEX Real Estate Services. So how many years have you been involved with Brooklyn right now?
Since I was born.
Okay, we won't, okay.
If you want to ask how long I've been working in Brooklyn.
How long have you been working in Brooklyn?
Since 1970.
And what have you seen recently in the evolution? We're in 2015. Have you ever seen it this strong? I mean, as you know, I'm a Brooklyn boy. I'm Brooklyn born and bred. I went to college in Brooklyn. I've been there. And when I was with Paulo the other day and I'm seeing what's happening in Brooklyn, I can't believe it. It's amazing.
So that's not a surprising statement. And there's a lot going on. There's always been a lot going on, but clearly the last decade...
See, but my crystal apple wasn't that clear. Now it's clear.
My crystal ball doesn't work that well. But I can tell you that, to your point, the last decade has probably seen as much happen in toto that occurred in the prior 3 decades.
So here, Mercantil Commercebank is a Florida-based bank, owned a subsidiary of a Venezuelan bank. How did the bank get involved and make a decision to make a commitment in financing a variety of properties and projects in Brooklyn?
Well, first of all, Mike, thanks a lot for having me on this show. I'm really thrilled to be here and discussing my favorite subject, Brooklyn real estate. You gave me a promotion there in the intro. I'm not a branch manager, but the regional manager for commercial real estate.
Right.
Look, I think Brooklyn, we've been in Brooklyn for the past 6 years, actively lending for the past 4 years. The price differential is compelling enough to make our argument for a loan good you have, three underpinning factors which are behind the growth in Brooklyn real estate. You have the population growth. You have the rate of household formation, which is the greatest of all of the boroughs in New York City. You also have some of the highest income level over there. So when we look at those fundamental factors, we find Brooklyn to be a very attractive proposition for us.
So how did the kid from Scarsdale, okay, who went to Wash U in St. Louis, decide to get into the wine production business and the venue business? One location right now, a second one to open up in
the fall.
In the fall, in the wine business. How do you decide?
I mean, my story, it's done.
If it's too early, otherwise we'd be uncorking the bottle now so everyone could taste
That
it.
it's too early.
We'll do it afterwards, yes.
I was working actually in Manhattan at a tech startup, and for fun, I was actually making wine in New Jersey, of all places. There are actually a few places that let you go in and make wine from scratch. And my biggest complaint about doing this in New Jersey was the commute out to New Jersey. And I was having such a good time making my own wine that I was like, God, why doesn't something like this actually exist in New York City where winemaking could happen here? You don't need to grow the grapes in your backyard in order to make wine. You just need to have the proper facility and personnel to do it. And for me, Brooklyn was a no-brainer. What's going on in this borough with the new kind of demographic that cares about what they're eating, what they're drinking, and they like that things are made locally is such a huge trend right now. What I found with wine is I thought in New York City, people love to drink wine, but how many people actually know how to make wine?
Can consumers like us and other people come to your place and make wine?
So we actually launched with that initial concept because that was what I knew. That was what I did. But we changed the...
I mean, do you step on the grapes like this?
You know, we get asked that quite frequently. The I Love Lucy scene is always on top of mind, but we have much better machines to do it. That concept actually changed. We actually decided instead of having kind of this where people can make their own, we wanted to build our own brand and build the Brooklyn Winery brand so more and more people can enjoy the product. But we do try to expose people to the winemaking process as much as possible.
You also, I would assume, have wine clubs like they have out in Long Island.
We have wine available on our website. We don't have an official club yet. But what separates us from a lot of the traditional wineries is this hospitality component. So we take advantage of the fact that we're in the heart of Williamsburg, in the best borough in New York City, and people can come and enjoy the product at our location, so they can see the winery, drink the product, have big events there. We do tons of weddings, corporate functions, everything, but it's all in the winery.
And you're opening up, you said, now in Crown Heights, and what's that going to be? What type?
So we're going to be opening a smaller location in Crown Heights. Our production in Williamsburg is actually more wine produced than can service that location. So we wanted to expose another neighborhood of Brooklyn, and to be honest, Crown Heights and Williamsburg is distance-wise not that far, but mass transit-wise extremely challenging to get to. So it's going to be a completely different group of people that will be able to experience our product and enjoy the great food that we make.
So now we have somebody over here who lived in Park Slope, born, right?
Not born, but raised, yeah.
Raised in Park Slope, operates in Brooklyn, develops properties, is an architect. How do you decide to get involved? Because most of your properties are renovations of older properties, correct?
It's a mix now. It's probably 50-50 renovation and new construction. And, you know, my background is as an architect, so we're a little different from most developers in that we approach our development projects as design propositions in addition to financial propositions. So we're pretty selective about the projects we undertake. So we do a mix of rehab.
So where are the newest developments you're involved with?
Three developments under construction right now, one in Clinton Hill, one that's going to be in Crown Heights, not far from your new location, and then the next one will be in Borum Hill.
And what's the price differential for a consumer in Borum Hill, Crown Heights, and Clinton Hill?
Yeah, I would say Crown Heights is probably toward the lower end of the budget, and Borum Hill probably toward the higher end, and there's probably a 20 or 30% spread between those extremes.
So, Timmy, you know, one of the areas that you've always been involved with, And, you know, in order to be a gentrified neighborhood is you need adequate retail. And, you know, downtown Brooklyn, you know, the joke was that when I used to do shows on downtown Brooklyn, the only thing that you had downtown was you went up to the Pathmark or the Target to get food, or you went to Junior's and you pigged yourself out and had enough cheesecake. I went to the Barclays Center a couple of weeks ago, and I went off 4th Avenue, 7th Avenue, and all these locations. There are all these new little restaurants and everything. Who's moving to Brooklyn? What are the retailers going over there?
So it's a good question, and the answer is almost anyone you could think of, from the very biggest big box retailers to the most entrepreneurial mom and pop shops. And I think, you know, Brooklyn Winery is a good example of that, where a concept that blends into a neighborhood, enhances a neighborhood.
Now, but part of the problem that when you grow, and I think you you and I know a landowner who's accumulated land over the years, that he was in another business, and he, you know, the question is, there may be a lot of people, but certain retailers can't afford certain rents that they believe that they deserve. Now, I can understand, like you're financing in syndication with the deal with the Whole Foods. Okay, that's a neighborhood. You know, you have so many people over there off the L train. It's a different case. But how do, you know, a small restaurant or a small boutique store afford to be able to pay rents in these locations? I mean, you got to tell the landlord this is not $150 a square foot. It's $45 to start maybe today, like we were talking on Waverly.
Okay. There are spaces that, you know, people could be very successful in that are still $30 and $35 a square foot. Fewer of them, but there's plenty of in that $50 to $75 a square foot range, and it doesn't seem to be discouraging people from opening.
You know, you're saying now, even though Crown Heights is not far from Williamsburg, but, you know, there is geographically, but the commute is different. Anything that is near I call it a TOD, transit-oriented development,
yes,
is really an important situation. When you, as a banker, look at deals, do you think of the transportation orientation?
Of course, absolutely. You know, one of the first things you mentioned, the deal that we're doing on Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg for the Whole Foods. You know, we looked at how far is that subway stop. You know, it's about 2 blocks away. You look at the foot traffic, and the foot traffic in all these retail corridors are to a large extent driven by the transit. So you're looking at the Fulton Mall, downtown Brooklyn. We've been there for a number of years. We love that location. You go there, you see tons of people on the street. You know, that you got all the subways in downtown Brooklyn. And Myrtle Avenue as well. And so,
but I'm going to ask, you know, Brian a question. You know, you could have gone, you know, when you look at Brooklyn, you know, since I know the entire borough and since I went to public school and junior high school in Coney Island, you know, you could probably get a reasonable rent. And it's a venue. It's an entertainment venue. You know, you have the Cyclone Stadium over there. You have Nathan's. You have other things. You probably could have got rent at $20 a foot in Coney Island.
That's a great point. Coney Island was, I'll admit, it was not in our kind of search radius. We did look in a lot of other neighborhoods like Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens and neighborhoods that are much more established. We actually really liked Crown Heights for a number of reasons. One, the subway access. So we're a couple of blocks away from a 2, 3, 4, 5 express stop right on Eastern Parkway and Franklin Avenue. And then we feel like the neighborhood is starting to really change. And then we're on the main corridor and can be a real kind of establishment that helps that neighborhood take the next leap.
How far would you develop? Where would you go?
We're pretty opportunistic, and we're also always interested in an architectural challenge. So we're pretty open. You know, Crown Heights was the farthest out of the sort of downtown, sort of brownstone areas that we typically develop in. But I've certainly looked in Bushwick and Greenpoint, Red Hook.
What about East New York?
Not yet, but you know, I wouldn't cross it off the list for sure. I think you know, I'm not sure what the rezoning is going to be in that area until that gets clarified.
The notion of a rezoning is, again, something that's high on the mayor's priority list and probably happen quicker than those sort of changes typically take.
But, you know, we've had major rezonings in Brooklyn. You had the downtown rezoning and you had the Williamsburg rezoning. Those are the two major rezonings. each one of them had, downtown had the transportation, and Williamsburg had the LNG train up to a point, and you had the water. East New York,
That's Broadway Junction.
Okay, Broadway Junction.
I mean, the subway serves it. It's one of the few places left in the borough where you can find big enough chunks, if you will, of real estate that someone can, with some forethought and some careful planning and more of a master plan notion, create a real different neighborhood. Meaning, we talked earlier about how often New Resi, how the retail that needs to serve those people comes later or doesn't come at all or whatever. I think East New York gives someone a palette to paint on.
You know, you bring up an interesting point. A couple of months ago, I had lunch with somebody who you introduced me to, who told me he had bought or was in the process of buying a site near the train in East New York, Atlantic Avenue type of neighborhood, where he's planning to put a supermarket and, you know, maybe some residential on top. Now, what has happened, you know, in some true transit-oriented developments, especially in New Jersey and Connecticut, you know, you build retail downstairs and you build 2 or 3 floors of residential, or what we've done on the Myrtle Avenue, which is a perfect example. You have retail and then you have 6 or 7 stories over there. Maybe that could happen in the East New York
I have no
section.
doubt. And I think that there's, again, such an opportunity in terms of scale and scope that it can develop into something that would be interesting.
So here's a question, especially with the banker, but we won't hold them responsible. How hard is it, you know, because everybody wants to be in Brooklyn because there are certain things helping the neighborhood. How hard is it to get financing today for what you're doing? And then we're going to get to you in a second.
Well, speaking personally, it's you know, it's always been an uphill battle, but now that I've been doing this for 10 years, it's certainly gotten easier. And, you know, 2009, 2010 were probably some of the hardest years.
Oh, those were a little couple of years that I could kill myself.
You may have heard of them, yeah. But I think, you know, more and more banks have entered the construction lending market in the last 2 or 3 years. I think lending standards have come down from a very, very tight standard that was introduced in 2009. So we're finding it better and better every year. But I think mostly it's by virtue of a good 10-year track record that we have.
That wasn't a set-up question, but I think I know the answer. As many people know, I've done a number of shows on restaurants, and when we get to the subject of bankers, I never put a banker on a show for restaurants because it's restaurants and Broadway have the same relationship with bankers. Banks just want to take deposits from those people and never want to lend to those people. Am I correct?
It's in our experience, that's I mean, certainly true when we started, and we started in 2010. So go back to, I'm trying to begin a business that has a pretty substantial capital requirement to get going, and even with these, you know, SBA-backed loans and all these things, the banks still wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So from an entrepreneur's perspective, to start something that requires capital, and really you just have an idea, to be honest, because in order to get a lease signed, you need to have money.
There's a terminology. It's called mashiga, crazy, remote. Okay.
I call it determination and passion. So for me, I had to, it was all individual investors that believed in me and the concept and allowed it to happen.
We didn't ask you to finance. His type of property, we'd say fine. Restaurants, that's a little difficult. I mean, the transformation over there. So if you were looking, okay, people come to you and they ask your opinion, what's your favorite asset class to lend to in Brooklyn? Is it residential? Is it retail? Is it industrial? Or is it office?
It's almost like having to pick your favorite child. No, I think, you know, residential still, you know, it still has lots of room to grow. We like it. You know, there's, again, you know, the millennials are flocking to Brooklyn. So there's definitely going to be a need for that residential space. And then the next wave is really the commercial uses. And then you have the retail, which we love. And the office, you know, people want to work, live, and play, you know. So it's all about, you know, you first live in the neighborhood, then you want to shop in the neighborhood, and very soon thereafter, you want to work in the neighborhood. We're just talking about, you know, people wanting to work in Williamsburg, in these different areas where they're living. So as a bank, it's much easier to finance the residential because the fundamentals are there and you can underwrite those.
But good retail, I mean, retail on Fulton Street corridor, you know, in downtown Brooklyn is class property because of all the conveniences. Or retail today, anything near the Barclays Center and what's going on with those residential is also the same way, I would say.
No doubt, no doubt. But I think the same holds true if you go further, as you go deeper into the borough, and as more and more resi gets built, the retail demand is there, the credit is there in most cases, and I think lenders are, you know, to your point, it's in some ways a virgin land. There's a lot of, if I had to sum up Brooklyn in one word, I think opportunity would be the word. And it's opportunity for everyone sitting around this circle.
Now, as I said, I'd assume that all four of us have been to the Barclays Center. I haven't been to the Loews King since I graduated high school, where the graduation was. Now, they just spent $93 million to restore the Loews Kings. Have you been there?
Not since it was restored.
Okay.
And I have lots of memories of that place that I can't talk about now. But that I got in trouble with Marty Markowitz years ago when some reporter asked me about the notion of what is now coming. And my answer was, well, I don't know. We have BAM in downtown Brooklyn. You have the Brooklyn Center for the Performing Arts at Brooklyn College. Did we really need another place in the middle? And Marty went ballistic on me. And I think
you're lucky you weren't banned from Brooklyn.
but in the end, I think he was proven right. The space has been restored meticulously to its previous.
And they're doing well. Every venue is
they're booked. No question. Which makes the point that Brooklyn is the place to be, and that so think about the impact of just that development with retail, restaurants, and everything else in several blocks in either direction. What a beneficial impact that's going to have.
But you know, let's get to Coney Island, which Brighton Beach has done well. You know, it's became a Russian enclave with Oceania. But you know, you could over there, little Odessa. You know, get the wine. You know, you better go into the vodka business.
I know it's the wrong.
It's the wrong
spirit,
product
exactly.
over there. But you know, Coney Island is a possibility. The negative of Coney Island is really the transportation. It takes too long. You get off the train, it's a 45-minute train ride, and then you have to get somewhere else, so it's longer.
It also feels like it's pretty seasonal down there as well. So, you know, when all the rides and everything's going and the hubbub.
Don't you realize it's the Hamptons of the West?
Exactly.
Okay, you know, it's the same water over there. It's the same beach, you know. You know, he could find some restored property over there and make some architectural, beautiful properties over there, you know, in Coney Island, you know, some of the things. And especially if you go to East New York, if it's not burnt out.
The buildings are beautiful.
Who else is coming to Brooklyn these days? What kind of retailers, what type of developers? I mean, the Chinese own 70% of the 15 developments that Ratner and they are building with Greenfield Development over there.
So again, it's a big question, and the answer is no one single answer. But I could tell you, you talk about multiple wineries, coffee. I can't tell you how many boutique coffee operations.
I never knew about artisanal coffee.
I
chock full of nuts. Okay, Maxwell House. Okay,
it's amazing. In Williamsburg alone, I see it's like another place opens. Like, oh my God, it's another coffee shop. Are we in Seattle? Like, there's more. The per capita density of coffee shops, at least in the North Brooklyn area, is so mind-boggling at this point. I don't understand how they all stay in business.
Well, the answer is because the demand is there.
Yeah.
Now, remember, real estate is the ultimate supply and demand business. And I think, you know, back earlier to the history, in my entire career in real estate, it has always been an imbalance between supply and demand. And demand has always exceeded supply. But I think at this point in time, that imbalance may be the greatest it's ever been. To the point you made earlier, everybody wants to be there. And there's just so much there, which is why Coney Island and Canarsie and East New York will someday be as chic and whatever as any place you want to pick.
But you need infrastructure. Part of the growth of those other neighborhoods, okay, you know, Williamsburg, before you went over there, before the 2006 situation, didn't have infrastructure. They didn't have the amenities. You had no retail. Right. Long Island City today, I went past it the other day. I've gone into it. They still don't have the infrastructure. I mean, I can't see Queens Winery opening up over there. It's not that type of marketplace, and it's spread out. The opportunities of what you see in Brooklyn are total different area.
So you're right, and I think that's true in any marketplace, that things get clustered around what may seem like a typical transit hub. But I think, I know you met with Marvin Shine, and look at where on 3rd Avenue and 30th Street, we did Bed Bath & Beyond.
Right, no, I think that's a great story. I think, the waterfront over there in Brooklyn, okay, the old Bush Terminal, which is now owned by Jamestown, the others, Marvin's property, which is called
Liberty View Plaza,
Liberty
right next
View
door.
Plaza, where you brought Bed Bath & Beyond, Christmas tree shop,
Bye Bye Baby,
Bye Bye.
Cost Plus World, and Harmon Cosmetics. And
How many square feet?
120,000 square feet on the second floor of an industrial building that is an area that there is the only other retail.
But it's not that far from Park Slope if you really want to. It's not close, but it's Sunset Park over there. But there's a need, okay? It's convenience over there, and you're saving money. You want to get to Brooklyn at a lower cost.
Well, and that's the point. And again, so there's two barriers to entry for traditional retailers. One is the price point, and second is the size. So where else in Brooklyn could someone go and find a 120,000 square foot floor plate and adequate parking? That's always a challenge for a bigger store. And we'll talk about it at some other time, but the little bit of space that's left in that building, 30,000 square feet, will be announced soon, and another tenant
Another retail tenant.
Another retail tenant with a brand that will just blow your mind when you hear who's coming there. So,
no, but look, I think it's not Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Nope. Okay, I think you have to. The only way the Field of Dreams in Brooklyn is, and in any of the boroughs, is you have to have a lot of other things in place to get the Field of Dreams to be working. Yes.
Yeah, and I'd say on the residential side, something that we've found is that there's a real appreciation for design quality in Brooklyn, at least in the neighborhoods where we've been working. And that's something that I think has supported our work, and something that's really made us feel good about coming to Brooklyn and working when we are right now, is that there's a lot of creativity there. I mean, Brian knows this as well, and he's a part of it. There's so much amazing energy and creativity in downtown Brooklyn right now. That it's a great time.
Problem, and it's not a problem, but the problem is that people one day will be priced out of Brooklyn because people want to be there, and because of the good things happening in Brooklyn, it's becoming rather expensive to live in Brooklyn, and that is the biggest problem.
It's an interesting paradigm that I see, where what's causing Brooklyn to become now what it is a lot of these creative folks, and in my business or my field, the makers. There's a lot of food and beverage makers that people love. Brooklyn Brewery is a great example. Have been there forever, and eventually we're getting priced out, but we're the reason why the neighborhood has become what it's become. And then if we all disappear, then what's Brooklyn going to become? And I think that's a huge challenge that we're going to see in the not that distant future, where in Williamsburg, I know at least with my space, when my lease eventually ends, I already have a very good understanding of what the rent, or the landlord may want to just knock the building down and put up his dream of condos. And then Brooklyn Winery wouldn't exist. But
maybe down on the lower floors, there'll be a Brooklyn Winery, It's hypothetically maybe there. But I think that the four of you have really given me and my viewers a pretty interesting point of view on what's happening in Brooklyn. I'd like to thank Paulo, Brian, Alex, and needless to say, the king of Brooklyn, Timmy. Find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, anything, and I'll see you next week.